Yeah. Is Stephanie not here?
I don't think so. She's still nursing.
All right, I'll call attendance. I'm here. Alan?
Yes,
Thank you. John?
John.
John, you here? Thank you. Greg?
Here.
Michelle?
Here.
Jim? Stephanie is absent. Jennifer? Hi. Lisa? Michael? Julie? Hey. And Peter? Okay, we have a quorum. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on the agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. The minutes of the education meeting from October 16th. Are there any questions and comments? Seeing none, the consent agenda is passed. Moving on to the next item, board chair's report. I have two things I'd like to report out on. And I'll say that the first is the most obvious one to comment on is the approval of the Ag STEM program. So as the chair, it's my pleasure to offer the region congratulations on a milestone that seems a long time coming, that we're finally here. I will say that a great deal of work has been done to get us to this point, but there's a great deal more work yet in front of us before it's all over. And September 2019, right, Greg, is not far away when we think about everything that needs to be done between now and then. So our goal was to establish the first of a next generation of agricultural sciences program and certainly not create a carbon copy of the past. I don't think that's certainly hasn't changed. And our strategic intent in doing this was to enhance the experience here at Chippewa primarily for our students, while at the same time being fiscally responsible to the region. We all know that we're constantly facing headwinds that we need to overcome. So it's going to continue to take effort to hold true to both those objectives. We agreed along the way that we wouldn't take a build it and they will come approach to the program, that we agreed that we will be deliberate in every step we take to try to make this journey an absolute success. And I still believe that, and I believe that's how we all feel. And I will say this, that our success in the end will be proportionate to the energy we put in and finding ways to take this program to places we haven't thought of yet. For example, I've been approached by a resident about working with an entrepreneur that's involved with indoor farming. And when you think about what that even means, where is that the future of agriculture? It's probably a part of the future of agriculture, but the point is they approached us and the proposition was, what can we do together? How do we connect these two dots? That's what I personally find very exciting about having this Ag STEM program here and being part of Chippewa and making it a distinctive program among the other 19 programs that we have. So if we explore opportunities like this and push the boundaries, I think this program will exceed our collective expectations. So again, congratulations to the region. Welcome to our future. And the work has only just begun. The second item is the board retreat was held on October 23rd. That conversation focused mainly on the importance of a unified message coming from the board and how the board sends messages out, whether they intend for those messages to go out or not. But in the end, the board is constantly messaging to the community, whether it realizes it or not. And so I thought it was a good, robust conversation. And the other items we covered, we went over the actions from the previous retreat, and I'll say we checked some boxes to say we did some things, and there were some things that were clearly still open items. And one of them, for example, was to spend more time with the leadership from the three towns, like Finance Committee, Boards of Selectmen, and that's something that we're following up with on the Finance Committee that Michelle will probably mention later. But thank you for that. I mean, it's exactly what we need to be doing, build those bridges. And we talked about improved communications and maybe more creative ways of using technology. So that was our retreat. And with that, I was going to hand it over to Pat, but Pat is ill this evening, and Teresa is filling in. So do you have something you'd like to share with us? Oh, sorry, Jim. Yeah.
You say the project's been approved. Has the state bonding commission met and approved this, and has that been signed by the governor? Has that happened?
From what I know, the only thing that has happened is the governor has signed the bill into law, and the two projects were called out in the bill, and now the bonding commission meets, I think, on December 8th.
Okay.
So that's as far as I know where the project stands. Now, I don't believe, and this is my own personal knowledge, which isn't much on this subject, Jim,
Yeah.
but I don't believe the bonding commission has the authority to undo law, so
Okay.
I know that there are some items open in the budget, that it was one line item that was vetoed, and I don't appreciate how the settlement of that line item is going to ripple itself back through the budget in any way that may impact this program. So
Okay.
if anybody else has anything they'd like to add, but that's the extent of what I know, Jim.
It sounds very good. I agree.
At this point, this has been a program of first, so I'm not even going to say it. We are where we are right now.
Absolutely, I agree.
Julie?
Just a quick question. Who is our liaison with the Diebold Foundation, assuming we're still getting the $1 million that they pledged?
That is an excellent question.
We've really never had I called and thanked them. I spoke to Mrs. Diebold and to him. That's really been it. They knew when the time was right, they could be approached. They committed to it.
Michelle?
I believe Valerie and Pat met with them at one point, way at the beginning. So that we'll have to think about that.
That shouldn't fall through the cracks.
No.
No. It won't.
Maybe Anthony will appoint you to the committee to speak to them.
You may have very well volunteered yourself. So I'll make a note of it. Yeah. Back to you. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Teresa DeBrito, the curriculum director, and I am sitting in for Dr. Cosentino, who is out ill, so she does send her regrets, and we hope she's feeling better. So there are a lot of great things happening in the district, so I do have the pleasure of congratulating 3 students who participate in the ASAP Young Photographers, and their task was to take photos expressing a unique interpretation celebrating this year's theme, which was every picture has a story to tell. What's your story? So congratulations to Garrett Brown. His story was Due Break of Day. Bronwyn Metz, story Unexpected Blessings. And Sierra Seletsky, her story Life in Your Hands. So congratulations to those students. Congratulations also in order to our varsity field hockey team and varsity girls soccer team that are heading on to the CIAC Class S first round championship games. So we wish them well tomorrow. In addition to that, I believe everyone had congratulated John Spear and the Chappaqua Cross Country team for their performance at the state championship meet. The girls' team earned Class S state champion runner-up status, with runners Emma Krebs and Elisa Effioni earning all-state honors, and senior Chandler Weatherby with second-place performance in the boys' meet also earned All-State honors. So congratulations to them. Also, we participated through CABE and submitted our newsletter, and we did get honorable mention. So congratulations to the staff and to Karen Files, who actually puts all of that together. So it was all good news that I had to share. So thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. All right. Yeah, well, you could just, good, you go
So
first.
just for information, there is a Radio City Music Hall trip to New York City. Thank you.
Wow, that's pretty good.
On December 20th. That's a high school trip. So wanted to make sure that we got approval for that as well.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstain. Motion passes unanimously. All right, there is a request to add another field trip to the agenda, a trip to Peru. So to do that, we need a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
Michael? Moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion passes. Michael, would you, Senior Nolan, rather? Thank you.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Mike Nolan. I teach Spanish in the high school. I'm here tonight to request a field trip to Peru through a company called Promotour that we've also used for trips to Quebec City with the French students. The trip would take place during the April break from Saturday to Saturday. The packet you have is just the basic information that they give to teachers. I direct you to the Peru homestay. There are two agendas, or two itineraries, excuse me. The one on the top, Peru homestay, would be what we would do. So having chaperoned a trip to Quebec City with the French students with this company, I was really impressed with the homestay experience. You know, being a teacher in a classroom, there's only we can only make it so authentic in our classroom. We Skype with kids in classrooms in other countries, but to really get the authentic experience of sitting down with a family, sharing a meal, spending time with them, and then doing the cultural activities during the day, to me seems like the ideal type of trip that I would want to take my students on. I used to take kids to Oaxaca, Mexico with Simply Smile. Some of you remember that. Due to the outbreak of the Zika virus, we can no longer do that. So to be honest, this is the next best thing, in my opinion. The biggest obstacle from my point of view is the price. It would be $3,600. We've brainstormed a number of solutions and workarounds. So basically, we would shoot to try to have the trip this April. We would need at least 12 students to maintain a price of $3,600. It works on a sliding scale, so the more kids we get, the price goes down nominally. If I did not get enough kids who were able to foot that bill, because it is a significant price, my department chair suggested that we push the trip off a year so that we would have a full year and a half to fundraise, and that I would revisit the board a year from now to once again, get approval for the trip. And we would apply for instance, the Whittemore grant from the Connecticut Community Foundation. We would do a variety of fundraisers. And then, the kids can also use a GoFundMe type website to offset the cost individually in addition to group fundraising. So if you have any questions about the trip, I'd be happy to provide you with any information.
I don't have a question about the trip, but I was wondering, has the board in the past, and I don't remember, so ever decided on funding trips by having some allocation in the budget that would grow over time for student trips, whether it would underwrite a portion of the trip to incentivize people and the teachers to take trips and give students, you know, a wider view of things? No, we've never done that? No. Maybe something to consider in the future, I would think. It certainly is good for students to be able to travel to countries and things of that nature, and offering something like that probably would be very attractive to parents thinking about coming here as well as people already here. So maybe worth putting on the agenda at some point.
Alan?
You know, that's a good point, Pete. And you often have talked about, and we really should get to this, because Pete's always, he hasn't recently, but you had often talked about a lot of the families we have in the area who are very wealthy and very accomplished and very interested in different aspects of the country and the world that would lend them to be, in some way, if not educational mentors, perhaps financial mentors to certain projects that they might consider their pet projects. And this would be a great way to look into something like that, to have a fund that's created by a few donors who would be most interested in whether it's diplomacy or international affairs or different medical issues or whatever it is that is an international interest to a certain number of families in the area. This would be a great way to look into that as well, I think. So we should put our heads together and see what we can do.
Jim?
Do you need approval of this from the Board of Ed tonight?
I would like that if possible, just so I can, you know, start to advertise officially to the students and get the ball rolling in terms of fundraising.
I'll make a motion that we approve the trip.
Is there a second? Jen? Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, we'll move. Oh, Greg?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I had the experience of having a child go on the Quebec trip. And this organization did a wonderful job. It was a fabulous experience, actually staying in the home of someone that lived there and getting to know their kids and everything else was a tremendous experience. And I think that the traveling abroad really changes your perspective, and I think it's critical, and I think we should approve this.
I'm assuming, Mike, you've checked State Department, et cetera. There are no travel advisories to Peru and all those other.
Correct. Yes.
Could I address that issue? Because I have been recently made aware of some advisories where they talk about a rash of incidents that have happened, violent crime, terrorists likely to carry out attacks against foreigners, political demonstrations, and the increased danger of politically motivated violence, particularly in urban centers. This was from an article in the New York Times this weekend about the travel warnings being offered for the United States. So I can tell you right now, this concept, the last time we ended up not approving a trip to France because we were concerned about violence, and all of these other countries are very concerned about sending their citizens to the United States. And so the question becomes, it's a matter of relative. I think that we need to have our folks on the ground paying attention to those situations. But I think if we roll up in a ball, we're going to find that we're not accomplishing a lot, and that's why I think we should be careful about that. But all of those travel warnings were issued by various countries, including New Zealand, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, France. Sorry.
It was not a litmus test. It was more of a question of, are we doing our due diligence and asking some obvious basic questions to at least know that we're paying attention. That was the only.
Oh, no, I wasn't being critical, but what I wanted to say is last time, after approving the trip, we kind of came back and revisited it and disapproved it.
Sure, I understand.
And so I just wanted to put that on the table now so we recognize when we look at these things, we have to take them in a degree of the fact that there's there are incidents and there are problems all over the world, including in our own country. And so I think we need to look at that very carefully, and we should check all those things. And I wanted to just make double the point, again, I'll say it, that those adults involved in it, looking at you, Senior Nolan, need to be paying attention on the ground and right before the trip and making sure that there isn't some reason that causes you to rethink it. But other than that, and avoiding the kinds of places where there are potential problems. And I think it's important. Wasn't being critical.
I appreciate it.
Chairman.
Thank you. Michelle, did you have a question? Or-
No, I was just going to just say that, in the past, we have approved a trip, and then based on incidents, unfortunately, we had to not approve it. So I guess the approval is on the condition that circumstances don't change. But I also love the idea of starting a fund and promoting international travel. I think that's a great idea, and I think the board could support that at certainly not fully funding, but at a level that would incentivize the kids to then go have their bake sales and go to Peru. So I support that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the trip to Peru.
Yeah, if I just may,
Yep, sorry.
I'm not adding to the motion, but just that it's implied that it's, everything is in place that needs to be done so that it's done as safely as you deem possible. We all understand there's some risk, but we appreciate that. And
Do we want to come
I mean, that's
back?
just implied in the motion, that's all
Okay.
I'm saying.
All right, fair enough. I agree, by the way. So the motion on the floor is to approve the trip with the implied conditions as described. It's been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, nay. All those abstain. The motion passes unanimously to approve the trip to Peru. Good luck. Hope you get your 12.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So moving into committee reports. First up, Building Committee. Greg? Or you want to save that for the ag portion?
No, I'll go through the basic thing just to give you an idea of where we are. Well, no, I think you're probably right. Let's put it off. We might as well, because so much of it's tied into that, so we'll come back.
Okay, at advance, Michelle, anything? Okay. Michael, for the first inaugural run, Education Committee.
So the next committee meeting will be on December 4th, which is our first meeting in December. I think we only have 2 scheduled for the board in December. And at that point, we're going to be talking a little bit about humanities offerings and possibly some expansions on the humanities offering side. And also having some kind of a streamlined process where students would have kind of a flow chart of different options to look at as far as planning for not just their given year, but all 4 years, really, much like we already have in place for STEM. So excited about that.
Very good. Facilities, Greg, back to you.
Well, your Facilities Committee continues to look at the many issues that bedevil us here. One of the things we're looking into right now are tennis courts. As you know, our tennis courts were supposed to have been relocated and completely redone as part of AgSTEM, but when the DAS pushed us into a lower budget number, that fell out of the project. So we now have tennis courts that need to be redone. And we're in the process of coming up with information on that. I hope to make a report at the next business meeting because we're going to be studying that in our meeting later this month on the 16th. We're also looking at other issues around the campus that need to be addressed and continue to address issues such as the heating system and making sure that it's properly maintained, and also looking into the to the future of what projects we're going to have to do, because as you know, we will have, this building continues to age and continues to need work done on it. The elementary schools have a fund for them, this building doesn't, so we take it out of the budget. And there will be further work that's necessary to keep things rolling fairly smoothly here. So we'll continue to work on that, and I hope to have a report to you shortly on some of the issues we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Finance, Michelle?
Yes, we had a meeting right before this meeting, and we covered quite a few items. I guess the basic, sort of the monthly task that we do is we went over the monthly accounts, and at this point in time, there's 4.8% of our budget that is not expended or encumbered or projected to be spent, which is tracking about normal for this time of year. And everything is in order and looking good for our regular operating. We moved on then, after talking about that, to talk a little bit about Ag STEM, and I won't go the finances, and I won't go into that because that's later on in the agenda. We also talked about the state budget and the impacts the state budget being passed have for us. As far as the education cost sharing part, it's very small. We actually made out pretty well, and so we will be receiving as a region, I believe it was about $5,000 less in total to the 3 towns than we did the year before, which is much less than we got more than we expected. So the shortfall is smaller. I just want to make sure I say that correctly. We also took a preliminary look at some of the other measures that were in the budget that will have an impact on us and how we, as school districts in the state, operate. Some mandates that will have cost for us, and some other operational things that we're still sort of waiting to see how that will flesh out. The only other thing I wanted to mention, unless there are questions about that, is that I have started visiting the boards of finance meetings in the 3 towns, and I sent a letter to all 3 boards of finance with the upcoming dates for the budget workshops, talking a little bit about the Ag STEM funding, letting them know when our meetings are, just to open up the dialogue to make sure that we're all understanding what's happening with the budget process. And I will make sure I will be attending the finance meeting in Roxbury in November, and Bridgewater's, I could not make their November one, but I will be, and then they don't meet till January, so I'll be attending that one. So if you have any questions on the finances. Jim?
May I just say that's really great. That's great effort, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'll throw a reminder out that the next Finance Committee meeting is going to be held at Burnham,
Yes.
because the next board meeting will be at Burnham, I think. If I-
Finance or policy?
Oh, maybe I misread it. Maybe, is it policy?
And
Oh,
facilities.
it's policy. Well,
Yep.
Yeah,
So yeah, our next board meeting, November 13th, will be at Burnham, and so we're meeting,
Yeah.
although committee meetings are before. So that'll be policy.
so I got you on the wrong one.
It's all right, I'll be there either way.
I'll just keep reminding people so no one shows up here in 2 weeks. Pete?
Yeah, in the old days, when I was on the board in 85, 86, they would hold meetings in each town. They would rotate the meetings.
Right.
And is the intention of the chair to go back to that theology?
No. We wanted to have at least one meeting at each of the schools. Actually, what it first started with is we had a meeting at Burnham for a different reason, and we had an impromptu tour of
Okay.
the school and the program that Kathy put in place, and it was suggested we ought to have a board meeting there so we can talk about that. And then said, well, if we're going to do it at one, then we should do it at the other. So not suggesting that we reinstitute an old standard or necessarily go back to that, but I thought it hasn't been done in a while, so it would be good to do it at least one more time. Okay. Alan, long-range planning. Sir?
We haven't met. We don't have a schedule yet. We have been, really, the thought has been that we have a lot of kinetic action at the moment with Ag STEM and with our administrative situation, and that we will begin long-range strategic planning once we have those two issues anchored in, which probably we'll be able to make plans in December for starting January with our long-range planning for this year.
Sorry. Greg, back to you, sir.
We currently have no negotiations ongoing, although we expect that we will start sometime in the next early few months of next year with the custodian and cafeteria workers union, the union representing custodians, cafeteria workers, and the union representing paraprofessionals and secretaries and clerical personnel.
Thank you. Michelle?
Okay. Yes, we have several policies on our agenda for tonight, so I won't talk too much about policy. I just do want to sort of a procedural thing so that you all understand, because I'm going to recommend one of the policies that's on our agenda that we table or put on hold for a future agenda. And I just wanted to explain to you, I think you all know that we had an audit done several years ago, and we've been really plowing through close to 100 policies that we've updated. And we had some that needed to be rewritten, and CABE did that for us. There were quite a few of those, too, 3 packets of, I think, probably close to 75 policies. Anyway, it's taking us I think we're in our 2nd or 3rd year of getting through those. And while we've been working on those, the state has continued to change laws. And so what happens then is we are updating the updates of the audit. And when that happens, there are so many versions of these policies floating around that occasionally the wrong one either is attached to our agenda or is in the packet. So I'll explain when we get to that particular policy, but there's one policy that, the middle step was not actually attached, and I'm just letting you know that there's just a lot of paperwork, and it's cumbersome. So that's it.
All right. Well, the floor is yours again for policies.
Here we go.
Second reading.
All right,
Take it
so
away.
second reading. So this one is pretty straightforward because it is a second reading and it is a brand new policy. So all of the language is new. This is 4112.51 personnel employment reference check. So if you open your packet, everything was sent to us electronically. This is just required language from the state. You'll see down at the bottom all the legal references regarding the FERPA and hiring policies and such. So we don't have a lot of choice on this. If you have any questions, please let me know. Anthony, you
Mr.
want me
Chair?
to call? Jim?
Sorry, I was
I make a motion
Trying
that
to
we
find you.
approve
That's okay.
4112.51, 4112.51 for second reading.
there a second?
Second, I think what you meant to say was 4112.51 and 4212.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. That's written on the agenda.
Yes, and I second it.
Right. Any questions? Seeing none, all those who approve, say, sorry. All those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstain? None? The motion passes. Next.
Okay. Next one is for a first reading, policy 4112.5 and 4212.5, personnel security check fingerprinting. Oh, this is the one I need to hand out. Okay. I am sorry, I apologize. So this was included in your packet. However, there were one version. The final version, yeah, you see an interim version. The final version is actually being handed out to you now. The middle 4 paragraphs that are in yellow are the new language. The strikeouts are the thing, is obviously what's being taken out. And I think the legal references were, I don't think those were updated, were they? Let me see.
Isn't this the one we just acted on?
No, so this is fingerprinting. The other one was reference checks. They are related, which is why the numbers are so close. 0.5 and 0.51, so they're very related. This is a policy, though, that we did have in place. We had a fingerprinting policy, but there is new law put into place that required us to add language. I'm guessing it was, oh no, I think that was in the previous language. Department of Children and Families Child Abuse and Neglect Registry. I don't remember. That language was not in the previous policy. So either that registry is new or the requirement is new. If you look at what was included in your packet, the only part that was highlighted was in the regs, which is attached later on in the policy, and that does not require board approval. But this new language here that's highlighted here does. Greg?
I move that. I move that we accept proposed policy 4212.5 for a first reading and.
Second.
Are there any questions, Alan?
Yeah, I just noticed this, and we're going to get to this in policy, but I just want to make sure that we don't forget it. And I don't know why I didn't see this before, but the grammar in the first yellow, the first highlight line is a little weird.
Alan.
Oh, gosh. All right, the grammar in the first highlight area is a little weird. If you look at, and the only reason I noticed it was I was reading what it replaced. They don't have to submit a check to the department. It seems like they have to send money. What they have to submit is they must submit to a check by the department or submit, the language is better where it's crossed out, must submit to a check of the Department of Children and Families Child Abuse and Neglect Registry. So we just have to change the grammar when we get to it in policy. I just wanted to make a note now so we didn't forget it then.
I have one more grammar, too.
See, you get a little look at what we do in policy. Michael and I look at grammar all day.
I'm sorry, Michael, did you have another, or you'll save it for the committee?
I could save it for committee. It'll be so exciting.
Yeah, I bet. All right, so we have a motion that's been seconded. Any further questions, discussions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstain? The motion passes unanimously.
All right, we will bring that back for second reading with the grammar fixed, and we'll highlight what we've fixed, so you'll see the new language. All right, the next policy 5145.4, students non-discrimination, is the one that I would like to push forward to our next agenda, if that is all right with everyone.
You're the chair. I'm sorry.
Do we need,
If
I
we
was just-
tabled
I would say if the chair's not
off
ready to
table-
proceed, it doesn't proceed. That would be my say.
Yeah, so we just,
I don't
yep,
think we
we'll
need a
just bring
motion,
it. we'll bring it-
Unless if I may, unless the board chair thought that it should proceed, then.
no, actually, I was going to ask whether or not a motion was required.
No, I don't. I would say no.
Committee chair wants to pull it from the agenda. I don't see any reason why not.
Okay, because it's just a clerical, we discussed it in committee, we just didn't provide the correct information for you to look at. And I think if we officially table it, then we have to officially untable it, it's just messier. So it's easier to just
Remove it.
not, yeah.
Right.
Okay, So then we will move to the next first reading policy 5113, students, attendance, excuses, dismissal. This one was in your packet. If you look at the one that has yellow only, that will be the policy that has the new language highlighted in yellow, has the cross out, the strikes. You'll see, for example, on the first page in the box, it's something that needed to happen by January 1 of 2016, so that language is taken out. A law update, very minor changes, I think, in this entire policy. And then the legal references are updated. So the changes are very, very minimal. Jim?
I move we approve this for a first reading. 5113.
Pete, that was a second. Any questions, discussion? If not, all those approve, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, nay. All those abstain. Motion passes unanimously for first reading. All right, Michelle, you're still on. The briefing on CABE Delegate Assembly, you want
Yes.
to make a comment?
All right. So every year, CABE holds a delegate assembly where all of the boards of education send a member, or a member attends in order to represent the board. And I attended last year, and I'll be attending this year, assuming that's all right with you, that I represent the board. I believe you all received this in the mail. Is that correct? Does this look familiar? Yeah. Okay. So in this packet, so what happens at the assembly is we discuss the platform of CABE, because CABE is our lobbying body to the state in general, whether it's to the education committee, to the legislators, whom the commissioner, and so they need to have an agreed upon platform in which to pursue. So each year there's a consent agenda. I have the full language of the consent agenda of items. If anyone is interested, there are 63 items on that. It's long, but I'm happy to share that with you. But on the agenda for November 16, we have 13 items, so if you've read through these and you have any comments, concerns, or questions that you'd like to share with me, please do that. I highlighted a few to bring to you just as sort of food for thought, because these are things that we're going to be discussing and voting on. Oh, also I should mention on November 8th, so that's 2 days from now, at 3 o'clock, there's going to be a webinar explaining the process for the delegate assembly and probably explaining a few of the items that will be voted on if anyone wants to take a look at that. So one of the first things that I wanted to just quickly highlight, it's a resolution that was proposed by the committee, and the title is Civility. And this is the resolution: that CABE urges public officials at all levels of government to model civil discourse in their deliberations, allowing for the thoughtful, beneficial, productive exchange of ideas and perspectives. CABE urges school boards to provide opportunities for students to develop their skills in conflict resolution and consensus building, and for school board members to model these skills in their own conduct. And I just brought that up because we sort of talked a little bit about that at our retreat. So I thought that was interesting that it's on the minds of everyone, and we will be discussing it as a sort of as a state objective. Another thing that I thought was sort of interesting, that they're going to be, it's recommended to be adopted, is the daily schedule for secondary schools, talking about moving the start of high schools to a later time, which I know we've talked about before. We know there's a lot of research out there about teenagers and their sleep, and how a later start time would be better, but then we always run up against athletics and busing and all sorts of things. So they're considering making it a statewide objective. It doesn't mean it will be successful, but I just think it's interesting to know that that conversation is happening. Another one that I thought was interesting, because I know we've had some discussion, the title is Carnegie Units, and it is talking about moving away from seat time and moving more towards mastery-based learning, which is something that we have been talking about in our district. And I thought it was sort of interesting that the Assembly is not recommending this move forward because they feel that there's enough flexibility in current state law, which I may or may not agree with. But so there are a lot of things that we are talking about currently as a board that are being talked about at the state level. And I think it's important. I mean, we talked about this in our finance committee meeting, how the state, a lot of the things that were passed in the state budget impact us as a board. And the only way we can make a difference is to be a part of the process, whether it's lobbying or making calls to our own legislators here in our district. So it's one of our job descriptions as board members to be active in the state politics, and it's we haven't done a lot of that, and then when I attend these meetings, I do find that a lot of what they talk about doesn't feel like it pertains to us. It feels like it's really about the big districts and the struggling districts. But there are some things that they are talking about that will affect us. And I also think it's sort of interesting. It's just something for us to think about. Of the 13 new items that we're going to be voting on, I think probably about 9 of them were submitted by boards of education. Thomaston, the Board of Education from Thomaston submitted a few, actually quite a few. And it's just interesting. They're another small school district, just like we are. So they're clearly trying to deal with some issues and are finding that the state is a roadblock, whether that is to their graduation. There's some online learning ones in here. So it's just food for thought for us in the future. We certainly have the right to propose a resolution and ask that it be made part of the platform to be lobbied for if we see that. So I just wanted to let everyone know that that's happening in a couple of weeks. It's the day before the CABE convention. It's on Thursday, the evening before. It's part of their convention. Does anyone have questions about that?
Michael?
I don't have a question, but I was wondering if I could suggest you moving forward with a possible resolution from our perspective as a board, and I'd be happy to get other board members' feedback on it. Some of you may have read when we were talking for all those many months about the state budget, and there were a number of ideas brought back and forth about ways to finally compromise on the budget. One of the ways that the General Assembly finally came to an agreement on was a teacher tax. They don't call it that, of course. That sounds bad, but that's what the media. If you're Googling it tonight, you can come up with teacher tax, and you can probably find it in any major newspaper in the state. And what they're doing is they're asking for 1% of every teacher's pension be taxed and to go towards the general fund, not towards the teacher's pension, but towards the general fund. So budgeting, for anything in the state would come from individual teachers on the order of $500 to $1,500 a year, right out of our pockets. And obviously, full disclosure, as you know, I'm a teacher, so I'm concerned about that personally, but I'm also concerned about it from the board perspective, because we're entering a time where the teaching profession seems to be kind of undergoing increasing pressure, increasing attacks, and it's very difficult financially for many people to think about a career in education. We're already facing difficulties finding qualified teachers in places like Region 12, too. And to make it even less attractive for people to want to teach and to enter into teaching, I just think is the wrong way to go. So that's my personal feeling. I'd be happy to, like I said, to talk with anybody about that too. And I don't know where CABE stands on that, but I would hope they would stand on the sides of teachers since they represent, you know, all of education.
Yep, there are actually, and I don't, I've read through all of the resolutions and all of the platform positions, but I don't remember all of them. But we have quite a few about recruiting teachers, retaining teachers, the, you know, quality of teachers being important. Just because we lobby for it doesn't mean it happens.
Right.
But it is absolutely part of CABE's platform, is the search for quality teachers and ways to keep them. So
Yeah.
that is definitely heard by CABE.
Good.
Jim?
I was just going to say I would suggest that you should prepare a draft resolution, either give it to Michelle and work on it. But if you're asking the board to approve it, it would have to get it to the board in advance, once it's in final form.
Sure. When's the date of your meeting, Michelle?
Well, it's too late for this one.
Okay.
Because it's already been published. There's a process, and we talked about it. It starts months and months ago.
Right.
And I think I mentioned, you know, there's a call for resolutions. I forget. I'll find out. I've got the schedule here. So
Well,
when
that
there's a
budget
call
didn't
for
get approved, as you know, and I think, was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Right. The budget just happened. So it would go on to the next. And I have a feeling once we all fully understand how this budget shakes out for us, there will be other resolutions that, or positions. And often what happens, and you'll see this in here, what we end up having to do is modifying a previous position to, updating it to reflect the current budget or current state of affairs, because they will pass a law that sort of impacts one here and one there, so we have to just modify. But also I'll let you know.
Great.
Thanks.
Michelle, are you a CABE delegate? Are you? Oh, okay. Congratulations.
Woohoo, thanks.
Yeah.
No, really.
Thank
We're fortunate to have you.
I have to say, Michelle, on behalf of the board, thank you for doing this for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Hopefully it makes a difference.
Well, I
As
think,
long as you enjoy it, that's the key. You know, if you want to do it.
I find it really interesting.
Good.
It's a fascinating process that I still feel a little bewildered at times that things manage to get through and become law, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's real sausage making, I guess.
oh, but it's worth, yeah, it's worth being in on the inside and seeing it and understanding how and if the time comes where we think we could add a resolution to that agenda and maybe, you know, push or influence, you know, we should be thinking about that and how to use it as a tool.
Absolutely.
know?
I was thinking, well, we have certain challenges because we're small, and
Right.
there are state law that definitely constrains and
For example,
and
what we
impacts.
talked about at the Finance Committee with the new mandate that's in the new budget, that we now have to file for Medicaid reimbursement. And according to Bob, it's probably going to cost us more money than we'll save in reimbursement. So, you know, something like that would be one of those issues for small school districts to say, we understand what you're trying to do, but you're actually hurting us in the process,
Right,
right? So it's not a net gain.
right. I also
yeah.
think moving forward as a agri-science program, there are state rules about, you know, setting the tuition, for example, and reimbursement, all sorts of things where we will now be part of a group of 20 that will have a real vested interest in some of the things the state does. So figuring out how to influence that process or be a part of it might be important in the future.
That's an interesting point. Is the group of 19 now 20? Are they organized in any way?
It's a good question. They probably ought to be in some ways.
There are a group of educators that meet 4 times a year
Mhm.
to discuss the different curricula, new policies coming
but they're not going into CABE as a
Lot.
group of 19 as a lot.
That would be specific to the person. Some are more active than others, but they're not active as a group.
Something,
Certainly to testify.
Yeah. Well, and so CABE is just one organization also that's doing that. CAPS has their own agenda, although they work together. But, yeah, so it's just one avenue, but. it's an
Anthony,
avenue.
there's a group that's been meeting since the financial cliff that happened maybe 7, 8 years ago. And it's CABE, CAPS, CASBO, and CAS. And we meet basically between every 4 and 6 weeks just to discuss these things, to testify on behalf of all of these educational issues, and to take positions on it. And I just happen to know because I've been doing it for the last 8 years. And so we meet quite often on these things, especially on the mandate stuff, trying to mitigate some of those and also to provide testimony at the state. So we've been doing this for a long time, and it is quite, as Michelle has said, it's an interesting exercise to see whether you can influence at all. But the biggest thing is writing letters and getting into the minds of the legislators because they have the votes. I mean, you have to do that portion of it, and it's time consuming. But for everything you do, when something's brought forward, such as that tax, it's going to take an effort to get that changed, but you don't have the vote. You got to get to the legislator. So there's a lot of effort going on.
thank you. All right, Michelle, good luck.
Thanks.
We look forward to hearing
Yeah, I'll
the
let you know how it
outbrief.
goes.
All right. Teresa, the goals.
Good evening again. I am speaking on behalf of Dr. Cosentino. I do have the district's professional goals here if anyone needs a hard copy. I see some have already printed them out, but if you would like, you'll have to excuse the color printer. It was running low. Oh, okay. Anybody else need a copy? I'll take one. Sure. More? Sure. There's plenty.
I have,
Anyone needs?
yeah.
Okay.
No.
Sure.
I don't need one. I got it here.
Never mind. So the template this year has changed. It used to just be a list of particular goals, but we really did meet as a team, the administrators and the superintendent, and we had input from the board's subcommittee that worked on the goals, and so we decided to have focus areas, and each focus area has objectives, and specifically, we really did take the suggestions from the board and articulate them in a manner that would provide us specific strategies and opportunities to show how we are working towards each of those objectives. So there are academic-specific goals, such as the implementation of the new science standards and looking at the standardized test results and how students are performing, and we looked at the areas needing the most growth and focused on those areas for math and English language arts. In addition, we looked at the high needs population and honed in on areas of need for students who receive free or reduced lunch, receive special education services, or are English language learners. In addition, we looked at student attendance, and the state has deemed that their goal is for students to come to school 90% of the time. Therefore, if students miss over 18 days, then they've already missed more than 10% of the school year. So that is a goal here as well. We took into account also the survey that was sent out to families. Teachers participated, students participated as well. And we looked at areas that needed improvement, and we came up with specific strategies for that particular area as well. In addition to the standardized test results, we looked at physical education because that is also an area that we report to the state and is part of our accountability index report. And so the first 7 focus areas we have delineated here under teaching and learning. And then there's a break, and the following 4 goals or objectives for focus areas all fall under organizational systems. In particular, we were looking at communication, how we can market the school district and reach out to constituents in the community. We were also looking at the Ag STEM Academy and what needs to get done to ensure that that program will be up and running on time. In addition, we are looking to work through subcommittees, the Education Subcommittee, the Long Range Planning Subcommittee, to articulate additional objectives that the board found would be valuable. And finally, looking at technology to make systemic improvements and streamline what we use in the district. So that's an overview. We certainly hope that the chart and the layout provide that clarity that you were looking for, and you will be receiving, updates. We obviously are going to provide input as to each of these specific objectives and monitoring their progress and looking for that improvement in all areas.
I can see this took a lot of work to put together.
Sorry, I have a specific question, and I was there at the meeting, so I should know this, but I'm just forgetting. So I was just looking on the first page at the goals, the SMART goals for the student testing, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking of cohorts of students and looking for, we set goals of sort of a 5% growth, but it doesn't look like it's the same set of students. But did we do growth on did we follow the students, or did we go by grade? Because it says here, for example, that the rationale is that the 5th grade got 70% in 2017, so we're going to go for 75%. But are those the 4th graders that we're looking at?
So Focus 2 is very specific to particular grade levels. So when a particular grade, a group of students, for example, the grade you just mentioned, didn't do as well as we are expecting, we do get together and we analyze those results. We look at the curriculum, we look at instruction, we look at best practices, because we want to ensure that the next group of 5th graders coming, that if there is anything that we need to strengthen and improve upon, that we do that. You're talking about growth in particular, and growth falls under Focus 3.
Okay.
Which is a part of the state accountability report. And therefore, that's where we would be looking specific cohort, how they do from year to year. And so we've honed in on those particular grades where we're looking for that improvement as well. So it's we're looking at both. We're looking at everything.
Both. Okay,
Yes,
good,
yes.
good, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Michael?
Teresa, just a question on Focus 2 for a second. If you're looking at 11th grade, you do mention that there is a goal that's focused specifically on the SAT in terms of math.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering why ELA for the SAT is not on there.
It's very strong. We're well over 80%.
So you were
So
feeling.
we are honing in on, because we do a lot, right? But these are a lot of focus areas, a lot of objectives, but the concerted effort has to be to really understand what is happening where we don't have that type of performance in mathematics. That's why it's on here.
So the goals you really selected were where
Needing
you perceive
improvement.
the biggest
Need
biggest
for
problems
improvement,
right now.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to kind of just talk about the structure of this, and I'm sorry, I can't remember whether we've covered this in a board meeting or whether we've just done this in our committees to develop this, but I really want to point out and congratulate Teresa on her work, Mr. DeVito, and her work on this layout, because as opposed to in the past when we had kind of an outline with bullets and sub-bullets, we now have a grid that really enables us to graphically see what our, in the headings, the objectives, SMART goals, rationale, and the indicators are, to make this something that the year before last, the committee tried to change our goals from simple statements and responses over the year to things that are actionable and measurable and accountable and therefore at the end recognizable. And I also want to make sure that people know that, I'm sure everybody knows this, but just in case, so don't yell at me for saying this if everybody knows this. We do know what SMART goals are, right? We're not talking smarter balance, we're not talking smart boards. SMART goals are, I hope, universal enough that everybody knows it's strategic, whoops, make sure I know these, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And this is a first for our district goals, and I just wanted everyone to recognize that we should be very grateful and proud of our administration for putting us in this direction for this year.
Thank you for saying that. It was a collaborative effort, but we've been using SMART goals with right, administrators, teachers have been using SMART goals for a long time to measure their own personal growth and professional growth. So it really was a collaborative effort. And Mr. Motto came to our first retreat day in the summer when we were all going to start working on this. So he was there to help provide input as well.
Any other questions? Well, let me just, Greg. Sorry.
I just wanted to thank you and your cohort, Teresa, for producing something that absolutely has a clarity of presentation. It's so easy to follow. It reduced questions because things I was going to question, I got the answer right in the document. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Have you shared any of it, or how has this flowed from the administration team down to the next level?
So administrators are meeting with teachers constantly, and therefore, we already have begun to gather evidence in all of these areas. Because, this is the work that we do day in and day out. So it's not like we had to wait for additional time to get started. And so the teachers and the administrators are already working on this. And so when we come and present an update, you'll be able to see that reflected in what we share with you.
And when they see these goals, because you'd be intimidated by, the number of pages, but when they see the goals, they feel like they're relevant?
They are
They're
very
gonna help them do their
specific.
job?
They are very specific. So for example, when we're talking about a specific grade, a specific content area, everything we're doing is to support these goals and objectives so the teachers recognize that because we work collaboratively throughout that particular process. So they see the importance. They know everyone's in the same boat. We're all on the same page because it's about progress and improvement. It's not, I do want to highlight, this is not like a gotcha or you're in trouble. It really is an opportunity to be reflective and to ensure that we really do provide students what they need so that they can represent their knowledge in different manner. so that if we're having a great year in the classroom, then we should have a great year on the Smarter Balanced results, right? And when we don't, there's a disconnect there. So if students really do have that knowledge, what's preventing them from demonstrating it on that type of assessment? And so we don't leave anything untouched. We really do put everything on the table and have honest, reflective dialogue and put plans into action to ensure that the students are able to demonstrate that learning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to say thank you for the collective effort for you and Pat and Kim and everybody else who contributed to making this document what it is, and for some of the board members who've helped along this journey that we started over a year ago. And it makes you sit back and think what this is going to look like next year. As you know, as you take this out for a drive and you feel like, well, we need a little bit more detail there, or we got a little bit too detailed, you know, we could pull back. So it'll be interesting to see what the next turn looks like of the document. But in between that, if you could think about, there's a lot here, so periodically as the year progresses, I think the board would like to hear
Certainly.
progress against certain goals.
Certainly.
And rather than trying to drain the swamp and you know, do this all in one shot, you know, if you could
Yes.
maybe sprinkle
Yep.
it into the agendas during the course of the year. Like tonight, we'll talk about this and something that we've done, had some success, et cetera.
We will absolutely do that.
Or where you're stuck and you need the board perhaps can help you
Okay,
get something unstuck.
will do.
So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Good job. All right, Greg. Well, we're going to move to Ag STEM, and first on is Bob to review the financials, please.
Sure, in your package, you, was included a summary of where the project is right now. The only change from the last time that you've seen this is on page 2, and it's the bubbled-in piece where on the agenda tonight is the pending approval of the commissioning agent for $77,292. Nothing else has changed in the report since the last time.
Can you just give us a quick update on what a commissioning agent would do?
That's going to be Greg. He wants to give you a commissioning agent report.
No, never mind. I mean, it's 77 is.
All right, let me bring you up to speed on the building committee. As you know, we made a presentation last time we were here about the new configuration based on the input of our consultants. That's now in the process of our architects preparing some schematic drawings to make those changes. And then they are also going to have to do new design development drawings. This is going to come with an additional cost to the region. They've had to throw out most of what they did up to this point on that portion of the building, but it's not a large portion of the building. So that's something that's going to require some adjustment in order to move us down that road. And so we're moving on that. We have completed the traffic counts. We will probably now shortly move to go forward with the rest of the traffic report that has to be done. We have completed the deep hole and percolation testing for the septic, and we'll go forward with eventually with that process to have the design of our reserve systems to permit our septic system, and the design of the two small systems that serve the animal demonstration building and the pool backwash, which is something that should be into a system and not into the ground, surface of the ground. We spent the last meeting primarily in interviewing candidates for a commissioning agent. Let me explain to you a little bit the basics of what a commissioning agent is. Number one, our state government requires that we engage a commissioning agent for a project. And the reason they do that is because it's a really good idea. What a commissioning agent basically does is they go through as we're designing and building the project, and they are there to ensure that certain of the systems affecting the building actually function as designed and as contracted for. For example, they are going to test all of the rooftop units, HVAC units. They're going to test various electrical and data components. They will be testing the envelope of the building to make sure that it is providing the energy efficiencies that we need. So what a commissioning agent does, they are our representative. They are the owner's representative to make sure that both the design professionals and the people actually constructing these systems do what they're supposed to do. The other thing they do is they come back about 10 to, I think somehow I have in the back of my head we have an 18-month warranty on this project as part of our documents. It could be a 12-month. I'm not certain on that, but it's been tossed around. But they will come back a few months before the warranty expires after the building's open, and they will be interviewing our people to determine whether or not the systems are performing as they were designed and as they were built. And if they're not, then they will give us the assistance we need to be able to pursue warranty claims before those warranties expire. So that's what a commissioning agent does. And we interviewed, we did receive 7 bids. We interviewed 3 that we felt were the best options and were conforming bids. And we are prepared to make a selection and to recommend, actually to engage that firm, and the fee that firm charges for the project is the number that you see in the minutes of $77,292, which would be their fee for the project. Most of that is for the AgSTEM program. A small part of it, I think it's about $9,000 or so is for the science labs, and they will be doing the work on those as well. So that's what the commissioning agent does. And then I would like to see someone make a motion to approve, if we're there.
So moved.
Review and authorize the board, not review and approve, but authorize the board, the building committee, to expend $77,292 for commissioning agent.
So moved.
Any questions, Pete?
Yeah, I have a question. Explain to me, the bonding commissioners meeting on December 8th. What is the function and purpose of their meeting on December 8th? Does that mean certain decisions are going to be made by them relative to various projects, for bonding various projects? Because my concern is, I'm not sure what they're meeting for, but if they were meeting to make financial decisions, I have no problem approving the $77,000. But if Greg is going to start spending that before December 8th, and if someone can explain to me a reason that the bonding commission wouldn't be making a decision that could reflect that any money we spent would have been in vain, I would like to know exactly why they're meeting on December 8th.
Well,
Before I would approve $77,000 and have Greg's committee or whomever start spending the money, and then find out on December 8th what everybody thinks is going to happen doesn't happen. So I haven't yet heard anyone explain to me, exactly what the function of the December 8th meeting is.
Sure.
Jim?
Did you want to go?
I was going to suggest that perhaps the question be dealt with, because there were several questions there, but primarily, when is the money for the commissioning agent going to be spent? I assume that a majority, if not all of it, would be spent at the end of the project when the commissioning is done. But Greg, I'll let you answer that.
Well,
You know what that profile looks like?
Yeah, the profile looks like that they are spending, I'm trying to make sure I have the correct one here in front of me. Yes, it looks like that they're spending about, on the AgStem project, $10,880 during the design phase. The design phase is where we are now. The bidding phase is when they spend $473, and then the construction phase is $44,733. So most of the money does not actually come until the point at which we're under construction. And so you're looking at about $10,880 plus $1,540 for the science lab project that would cover what they're doing during the design phase. And the reason why I'd like to go forward now and not put this on hold, because first of all, I don't know that the bonding committee is involved in making decisions on what projects get funded. I think they're making decisions on how they're doing the funding and when they're going out to market and what they're doing. And we can't delay this any longer. Frankly, we're already late in having the commissioning agent in place. They should have been working during this design phase. The only good news is because a piece of our design has been set back, they'll have a little more opportunity to have input. But we're going forward with this project now. And in fact, I'm telling you that next meeting, I had intended it to be tonight, but it didn't make it onto the agenda. I'm going to come in and ask for authority to spend $32.89 million to give us the authority to deal with this program. If we're going to get that school open in the fall of 2019, we got to rocking and rolling here, and that means we're going to have to turn our professionals loose to get their jobs done so that this school is able to be built in time to open it so we don't increase the cost, because I can tell you that the state is not going to fund any increased cost because we dragged our feet and didn't move forward. In fact, they're not going to fund any increased costs. So let me just stop right there. So in any event, that's why we have to really move forward with it, but that's where we're going with it. Not a lot of money is going to get spent in the short term.
Jim?
Thank you. Two things. I wouldn't approve millions of dollars to be spent unless this was done and delivered. I mean, it was approved by the bonding commission and signed by the governor. It was actually done. Just speaking for myself. But to answer Peter's question, none of us here is an expert on the bonding commission. There's a bonding issue, but we've heard and you've read and I've seen that the budget's been passed, and this is part of it, and it's going forward. It's been approved. We have faith that it's going to happen. We need to keep the thing moving. We understand that there's some risk in spending the money without absolute final approval. But it looks good enough for me to vote on it. I mean, I think that's what our citizens want us to do. So that's why I'm doing it. Is there absolute assurance? There isn't. And are we experts on the bonding commission? We're not. But it it looks pretty good.
Jim, could I ask you a follow-up question?
Yes.
You said until the governor is signed, he's obviously signed.
I believe I have this correctly. I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody knows that I'm wrong, you can tell me.
So what's your understanding of the process? It's going to go through the bonding commission, and then the governor has to sign something that comes out of the financing process?
Bob, can you help us?
The bonding commission meets virtually every month. And
But I'm sorry, for this project to be approved, does it
right,
require?
the next step of this thing is at one of those meetings, projects across the state will be on that bonding commission to go to get funded. What date that's going to happen, it generally happens in December or January, one of those 2 months. And it's the expectation that's when it's going to happen. In addition to road work and bridges and everything else, they take a whole series of things and they move it forward. My understanding, at least, is that because of the delay that the state put on us by pulling it the last time, that our project is at the front of the line. And I think Greg heard the same message when we were at DAS. What that means to me is we're going to be in that mix at the early stages of this being implemented from the budget. It could be the 8th of December, it could be in January. You don't really know at this point, but it's there.
I think it would be, my opinion, I think it would be helpful to the board if we can get some sort of, I'll say, understanding of what the process is before this is completely done,
Yeah.
and Greg has got a check for $39 million as an account. What is the process that's left? If that's something you could help find out and communicate to the board via email, so we just all have the same understanding of what the hurdles are, as minor as they might be, I think it's good, because we're clearly not all on the same page in terms of what happens next, who has what authority, does the governor actually need to sign anything again, et cetera. But if that's something, Bob, you could work on,
Sure, I
the
mean,
board would appreciate it.
just as an appreciation, as we're working on our project right now, and we're in the design phase, DAS is going to sign off on that. And they're going to tell us that we now have a letter to go out to bid. In the steps in between, the bonding commission is putting the bonds out on behalf of the state to honor those commitments that were made in the legislative session. I have not seen a place where they take it off again, and I've never seen it happen, because all of those, and there's many more bonding issues in that governor's budget besides education that were signed. I mean, there were road projects, there were
Well, I understand.
local projects.
just-
How they put it all into
Good
each
point.
meeting is difficult to tell you when they're going to do it.
Alan?
We could probably get a clear answer from our bonding counsel, who's probably familiar with all this, but I just was looking at the website, a good place for information on this, and it doesn't look like it's a formality, because it says the State Bond Commission exists under the provisions of Section 320 of the Connecticut General Statutes. The functions of the SBC are to determine that it is in the state's best interest to approve project funding requests on an agenda submitted by the governor. So what we have then is we have obviously a funding request list, which is part of the budget, which is being submitted to them by the governor, because he signed off on the legislature's funding. So one would assume, one could assume that that's just a formality, and they say, okay, we approve. Or of course, since we never say never, when this budget and bonding situation we've been through in the last 2 years is what we're talking about. I don't think we can assume that, and therefore we want to make sure that it's actually approved by the State Bond Commission, whose job it is to make sure it's in the state's best interest. I mean, there's no reason to think they won't, but let's make sure they actually have before we spend the money. You know.
John?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about the bonding also. I think I've watched a few bonding commission meetings, and the governor is the chairman of that commission, and DAS commissioner is on the committee. Senators, revenue and appropriations are on the committee, and OPM, Ben Barnes is on the committee. And what they do is they submit for approval. For instance, DAS Melody Curry submits the whole total school construction priority list, and there is a vote, up or down. Now, I don't know if they have the power to line item any of those items in the school construction priority list or not. I do know that the state is still in serious trouble. Although we have reached tentative agreement and the governor has signed the budget, there are a number of things in the budget that are predicting still a huge deficit. They calculated that the hospital tax would offset the budget, but that's being challenged. The green energy sweep that they claim would be revenue to spend on other things, that's being challenged. They don't want to take money out of that fund. And there's a bonding cap in place. So who knows, with the implementer bill and that, who knows what additional costs will get added to the bonded projects. So if they can't come up with a way to pay for the bonding and to stay under the cap, they're going to look to cut things.
Pete?
Yeah, well, from my vantage point, if Greg feels, from what I heard him say, he doesn't need all $77,000 or is going to spend that all at this moment, I certainly be willing to approve this based on the fact that there's a certain amount of money going to be spent over the next month till the bonding commission meets, and then while some feel no deal or blow right through, some feel it wouldn't, at least we wouldn't have spent, and I don't think we're going to spend $77,000 in the next month or two anyway. So my only concern is how do we construct this so that, fine, if we give Greg the okay for $77,000 to hire someone, how do we just protect ourselves while we're spending a certain amount of money in the next 30, 40 days that something doesn't happen, which we don't believe will happen, but happens, and the bonding commission makes a decision which nobody believes they would make. So I just want to cover ourselves somehow so that I realize that if Greg says and the board says, go ahead, we're going to hire a consultant, and the contract says $77,000, how are we or not at risk for losing something?
So is your question, if we sign a contract for 77 and we have to terminate, are we liable for the full 77?
Right, that's what
Greg?
that's what I'm asking.
Every one of our contracts, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've done these, every one of our contracts has an out provision in the event that the funding doesn't come through. So we are protected against that should the committee, which is made up of parties who have all passed on this project in the past. I mean, you've got the governor, the OPM chairman, well, the state treasurer, Denise Napier, and Kevin Lembo, the state controller, haven't passed on it, nor is George Jepson, the attorney general, but Melody Curry, and then you've got the senators who are the co-chairs of Revenue and Bonding Committee that are on there. So with the ranking and chair of each of the committees, it doesn't look like things that are on the list that they've already voted to approve that they're likely to peel off. But should that happen, should that unlikely event come through, we can protect ourselves on the downside with our contract. The second thing is, since we are not in the construction phase until we complete the construction documents, which doesn't happen, we're not in the construction phase until we go out to bid, and we're not going out to bid until the spring. It's unlikely that we are, not unlikely, I can no way see before the end of this year us spending more than the $10,880 on the design phase work for the Ag STEM and the $1,540 for the science project. And we're going to have to go through with that science project come hell or high water. We've got to do it. We can't just leave those science rooms in the condition they're in. They have to be brought up to the snuff. So bottom line is, we're not going to spend very much money. We're not going to spend all of it, probably all of this amount, probably before December 8th. And then after that, hopefully we can go forward with the confidence that that's where we need to be. So I don't think it's a lot of money to be spent under these circumstances to get where we have to go, and we do have the out in our contract.
Michael?
Greg, two questions for you. The 77,292 for the commissioning agent, that just seems like a no-brainer. And thank you for giving us an overview of what the commissioning agent would do. But I know you've also mentioned the clerk of the works at one point. Is that the same person, or is that a different phase?
No, we don't have a clerk of the works. What we have in this contract is, once we actually bid the contract, well, once we actually go out to bid, we're going to get firm numbers for the construction costs. Our construction manager will then look at those numbers and give us a number that is, he's a construction the construction manager, O&G, is a construction manager at risk. That means once they give us a number, if the cost exceeds that, absent certain very narrow confines, but if the cost exceeds what they've given us, then they're the ones that have to pay it. So that's our protection against those kind of things. So that's really the process. So there really is no clerk of the works so much, is that once we actually bid it and the construction manager is construction manager at risk and have given us their number, they then start managing the project. The architect is finished at that point, except for contract management, reviewing whether things are built according to the plans. But at that point, the construction manager is working with the contractors. We pay only the construction manager. We don't pay the subcontractors. The construction manager pays all the general contractors and subcontractors, and they are the manager. And then we pay them. And we pay them when we get a report that indicates that the work's been done, is certified by architect, done in accordance with the plans, and we know where we are, and we know we haven't paid them more money than the amount of work that is expected. And that's sort of the way the process works once we get there. So there is no clerk of the works.
Thanks. The other question that I had was, I know in past meetings you've mentioned that the building committee would change at some point in the process from its composition to maybe how it would operate. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us when that we could expect that change and what that change would be again.
Well, I don't know if there are going to be any substantial changes in the personnel on the committee. There may be. We may slim down a little bit. We have representatives of each of the towns who are involved in the construction trades and various aspects of it, and then myself, and then and Valerie, and that's who's on the committee right now. We have 5 members. What will change is that once we're under construction, the committee will be mostly approving payments. That's really mostly what it's going to do. Occasionally an issue will come up based on field conditions where they say we're going to have to make a change, the change order is going to result in some increased cost or whatnot. If we don't think that those costs can be washed out from other contingencies and things, we'll probably have to come back to the board for those. But the bottom line is we will make those decisions. We are the owner's representative and make the decisions on what has to be done for those things. But that's rare. Most of the work we do is approving payments. You know, we look at the chart we get that shows that whether everything's in line and we're entitled to improve, and then we approve. And that's really.
I'm sorry, Michelle, you had your hand up first.
I just want to thank Michael. I had the same question about a commissioning agent versus a construction manager and a clerk of the works. And then, so I don't need to ask that question again. I just have a comment maybe. I know, because Anthony, you are involved in the agenda. And at our retreat, we had mentioned having a little bit of explanatory text on agenda items that we are acting upon. And I think this one would have been helpful for me I didn't know what a commissioning agent was. I didn't know that this was the recommendation of the building committee. This was relating to the AgSTEM project, you know, just sort of 3 sentences about it for us and for our public.
That's a good point.
We
That's
know
a
what
great
this,
point, yeah.
because that was, I didn't really know what that was all about. I figured I'd learn when I got here. Thanks.
Pete.
Okay, I just want to finalize this in my mind. So we give Greg the authority to go ahead and hire this firm for $77,000. Do we write them a check for $77,000, give it to them, and then?
No.
Okay.
No.
Explain what happens.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're not giving Greg the authority. The authority you're giving is for the building committee to spend $77,000, and then we will make the decision on engaging this firm.
Okay.
We're pretty certain it's going to be the firm. I think their references have checked out. We're in pretty good shape on it. Then what will happen is that we will engage them.
Right.
We'll have the contract. They will go to work, and once they have completed some amount of work,
Right.
then they will submit an invoice, and
Okay.
we will verify that
Okay,
they've
got it.
completed that, and only then do they get paid. No one gets paid until they've completed the work for which they've invoiced us.
Understand.
And we have an architect to verify that, and we verify it in-house. Bob looks at it, Don looks at it, and we try to make a determination that the work's been done. So that's the way it's going to go.
So
No
we're
one's
not-
going to write them a big check and say,
So the
oh,
board's
by the
not-
way, give it back to us if the deal gets canceled. No, it
So
doesn't.
the board's not at risk for this total amount based on the time being involved in wherever they are in the course of events if something happens.
Right. So do we have, John?
Could I ask 2 more quick questions of Greg before we vote? It seems like the building committee has two or more hurdles to clear before this is even considered a project. Has there been any results on the septic systems and the feasibility of putting the reserve fields and a independent system for the ag school?
Yeah, I haven't actually gotten the test results yet, but my understanding is that they have found sites that perk and are appropriate for both the reserve area for our principal septic system and for the small system that would serve the animal building. But again, I have not seen the reports yet. They haven't given those to us. We expect them at a future meeting.
Well, I think we should definitely have a very conclusive answer on that before, because if you don't have workable septic systems, you don't have a project.
Well, if we don't have a workable reserve area, we don't have a school. We know that we'll have a workable reserve area for the septic system, and we're not anticipating that we're going to have issues. I mean, they dug a fair number of holes because they want to find where they can put it. You can always put a septic system in. The question is, how much is it going to cost? Because you can engineer anything. They put mounted systems above the ground. Anyone who's ever owned a ski condo knows that those systems are mounted above the ground. They usually don't do anything but hit rock the minute they stick anything in the ground on mountainous areas. So it is possible to build any system, but we're expecting they're going to be able to build it, and we're going to get some better idea. I think the reason we haven't heard everything is that I think they're getting some cost numbers on what the costs are for these systems.
Right, yeah, I mean, there is a cap on the amount. And how about the 2,000 square foot expansion? Has that been presented to DAS yet?
No, it has not. It will be shortly, but we have not been up there on the 2,000-foot expansion yet. We have not actually been to them on that.
I'd like to make the rest of the board aware that the state DAS has what they call space standards requirements. And if it's deemed that those square footage exceeds those requirements, we would be in danger of a reduction of our 80% reimbursement rate. So I think we should get some approval by DAS. You know, I realize that you have to present plans and designs, but if they're going to say, forget it, we're not expanding this project any further than we've already agreed to, we're wasting our money there.
Well, we really need to get to the next level of documentation before we can go to DAS, and that's the design development level of documentation, which we're close to finishing. We expect to be finished with that sometime within a month or so from now, and that's the opportunity for us to go up and to take them through those documents. You know, they do issue space waivers fairly routinely up there. They do have standards. They understand that they can't enforce those standards strictly, because the reason we're needing this extra space is not because we're trying to make the Taj Mahal here. We need it because it's a matter of safety. In order to have the space for the number of kids that have to be in the program and to have it safe, so that we're not, you know, we don't have inadequate room to move around the materials that they have to move. And this has really been it. The other reason for the space is that it's a little bit dictated by the curriculum, and the curriculum has changed a little bit since this project was first conceived or first presented to DAS, because we've had some changes in the way the state's going to approach the agricultural program. And so this has caused us to make a few other changes in the way we're delivering it, and hence the rooms. The other thing we've done is something that DAS particularly likes, in that we have taken several classrooms that we had for different elements of the program, and we have combined them into a single shared classroom. And that's what DAS wants schools to do. They want to share classrooms. So we believe that although we're increasing square footage by a very small amount, it mostly relates to safety, and we've done it in the standard where we have eliminated classrooms and given different teaching spaces, and we have shared classrooms. So we think that it's an economy that they'll appreciate. But look, we obviously have to go up there, and this is a process, and we're going to have many different things that come down the pike. Eventually, we're going to bid the job out, and we're going to get a number, and we don't know what that number is going to be. If something drastic happens in the construction industry between now and then, but that's the way projects are. So I agree with you that all these things should be done, and we're in the process of doing them. Unfortunately, we really don't go to DAS till we have another level of documents, and that's sort of what we're trying to get to, and then.
No, I understand, but we were forced to downsize twice, mainly because the square footage of the entire facility, is definitely over capacity, or under capacity, excuse me. But I think their intent is you don't increase the square footage of the ag component outside of your existing footprint. If
Well-
at all possible.
I know, and the problem is it's not possible. If we had the clear ceiling space in the existing building to accommodate some of the things that we have increased the square footage on, we would do it. We would bring it in the building and not add onto the space. But we don't. I mean, all of the items in that north addition, which is where the primary space had, it was a little 200 square foot thing on the animal building, but most of the space is actually, it's not 2,000 feet. It's about 1,300 feet added to the north addition. There's about 700 feet that's added within the existing building. So we're really just adding ag stem space within the existing building. We're not expanding the building for part of that. So that 1,300 feet is all shops. It's all the metal fabricating, the wood shop, and the small engine shop. And all of those things require a ceiling height in excess of what this building provides. So it's not like we could tack it on to the existing building. If we could, we would have. We had space to tack it into the existing building if we needed to invade more of the space up there. But what we were forced to put it out there. And I think under those circumstances, based on the way DAS has gone with this, my guess is that they're going to realize that it's not perfect, but it's not a problem. Again, what are they going to say? We want you to reduce your program, and we want you to reduce the safety margin for students. I just don't see that happening. And I think we can make a good case that we need the extra square footage. And we'll have to explore our options if for some reason they don't agree. I mean, it's not a perfect situation, but I think they're used to buildings changing. They add, they contract. They reduce, they contract. I'm sorry? Well, it's probably dollars too, and we think that we're hoping we can bring this in within the number that they've approved. And I think if we go up there and say this is not going to have a dollar impact on the project, because we've found economies elsewhere, I think my guess is that it doesn't become a problem for them.
Pete?
I move the question.
Okay, so do we
Have to go to sleep tonight.
do we have a motion?
Yes, there's a motion pending to approve this expense.
I kind of lost track. Thank you, Jim. Is that motion second? Okay. All those in favor?
Can we skip, can you withdraw us voting on your moving the question, and we can?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
I-
Pete. Yeah,
I'll remove my
thank you.
motion to
Oh, we have to,
move the question.
now we can cut right to the chase. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded to approve $77,292 for the commissioning agent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
All those abstain. Motion passes to approve $77,292 for commissioning agent. Next item is to review and approve a revision to the schedule. Do you have that? I know it was part of the packet, I believe.
Yes.
Alan?
So I'm going to assume that is just to add building committee meetings and our Burnham location, is that? Oh, you found another change, okay.
All right.
Yeah, the original schedule had the district hearing and Board of Education April 2nd, and the new schedule has it as April 9th.
I move we approve the new schedule.
Second? Any questions?
Calendar.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstain.
Thanks, so the state's
Move to adjourn?
Second. We are adjourned.
about,